Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the International Sports Law and Governance LLM. My name is Mark James. I'm the program leader of this new Masters, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Sarah Carrick and Seamus Byrne, who will introduce themselves shortly when we start to talk a little bit more about ourselves and the program. The LLM in international sports law and governance has been something that we've been planning for quite a long while. Manchester Law School has an extremely long and storied history of teaching and researching in sports law. We were one of the first sports law master's programs, originally back in the late 1990s, and we can trace our history in sports law innovation back to the Unit of Law and Popular Culture, which was set up by Professor Steve Redhead in the mid 1980s. And I was one of the first members of that when I joined for the first time at Manchester Law School back in 1997. We were also the founding host of the British Association of Sport and the Law and have had several of the editors of that publication over the years. So we've got a huge degree of experience here at the moment. We also teach sports law at undergraduate on our law degree and on the sports management program, and we run a module on the MSc in sports business policy and management. So at present, we have around 300 students taking sports law and 3 PhD students doing sports law. So the LLM is the final piece of the jigsaw that means that we now teach at every level across the school and the faculty. We have a very experienced team of teachers and researchers on the programme. I will get Sarah and Seamus just to talk about themselves shortly, but all of us are researching actively in the area or advising major organisations around the world. My name is Mark James, as I've already mentioned, and I am a professor of sports law here at Manchester Law School. My work has varied over the years from looking at everything from consent in sport through the regulation of football spectators, and more recently looking at issues to do with the organisation and legal frameworks that apply to major sports events like the Olympics and the Football World Cup. We've also got on the team Dr. Chema Banazir. He is he can't be with us today because he's giving a presentation in Olympia in Greece at the moment. Cem is from Turkey. He is a specialist in the regulation of sport and will be the module leader for the sports law and regulation module. He's also done a lot of work around human rights and e-sports and is a former lawyer from the Turkish Football Association. Dr. James Brown, who will be leading on our research methods classes, his PhD was in vicarious liability for injuries in sport and is currently doing a lot of work around the concussion litigation that is occurring in the rugby world. I'll hand over very briefly now just to my two colleagues so that they can introduce themselves. Seamus, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Mark, for that and for that outline. So my name is Seamus Byrne. I'm a researcher here within the law school, and my own background is principally within the area of the overlap of sport and also children's rights. And I examine the impact which large sporting events have on children's rights, and how the rights-based frameworks can be applied and also deployed within a sporting context. I have written extensively in this area, so I look forward to any questions that you have, and I look forward to meeting you also when the masters start. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Seamus. Sarah.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Carrick. I'm a senior lecturer here at MMU. My PhD research was primarily in intellectual property rights, and how athletes avoid tax through their image rights, and I've published within that area. More recently, a lot of my work has been around gender equality, so looking at the US women's national team case, but also looking at how female athletes aren't also treated equally and equal pay, and how that can be challenged on a broader or wider scale. I've also played handball at both national and international level for Scotland and Great Britain, so sport is something that's always been a massive part of my life as well. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah's the only proper athlete amongst us. I'm just a broken athlete after multiple knee operations, having been a rugby player in my youth. The additional person that's on the list on the pictures there is Kevin Carpenter, who is the lead integrity officer at the International Table Tennis Federation. Kevin is a former colleague of ours and is one of our visiting professors and will be contributing to the modules in respect of things like anti-doping and match fixing, which are his areas of specialization. And he's just one of the key industry links that we have. We have particular contacts with a range of law firms, in particular Mills and Reeve, who are based just across the Oxford Road from us here in Manchester. We have professional links with the Centre for Sport and Human Rights, with the Asser Institute in The Hague, and with the Lillehammer Olympic Studies Centre in Norway. They're just a few of the very wide range of people who we're hoping to be able to incorporate into our masterclasses, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We also are developing collaborations with a group of Indian colleagues at the Gujarat National Law University who are working with the government on the potential bid that India is putting in for the 2036 Olympics. So why study at Manchester Law School? Because we are very good at what we do. We have a lot of history in what we do, and we are able to bring that knowledge and those contacts with us into our programme. What we'll do now is talk very briefly about what kind of topics we'll be covering in the Masters. So the structure is that in the first semester, you'll do one 30-credit module on sports law and regulation with a 15-credit module on sport and human rights and the research skills module, which introduces you to various research methods. In semester 2, sports law and business, and then there's an option of either the safeguarding or the contemporary issues module. The research design module is set up so that it creates a research proposal for the dissertation that you do in semester 3, which is then handed in the September of 2026. So that's the basic structure of what we're going to do. So we'll now talk a little bit more about the various modules. Chem is actually going to be the module leader for sports law and regulation, but Sarah has worked with him on this. So Sarah's just going to talk very briefly about the kind of things that you might come across in this module.
Thanks, Mark. So this is the first 30-credit unit that you will sit, and it's set up to be a bit of a foundational module, which aims to set the scene for the rest of the programme. So in this unit, along with Chem, you'll explore the origins, the definition and the governance of both sports law and Olympic law. So we'll look at the how, the why and when sports governs itself, as well as looking at how the law influences and dictates how sport has to govern itself in order to be in accordance with the law. So some of the current issues that we will be looking at within this unit, just to give you an idea of how this works in a real life example. So we'll be looking at some of the issues surrounding the Football Governance Bill, which has just been approved in Parliament yesterday. So again, very current and interesting. So they have approved the independent football regulator and how that will affect the day-to-day running of football. And other issues that affect sports governance, such as giving the hosting rights to Saudi for the Men's World Cup in 2034, and how that affects sports governance, and that there's a lot of human rights breaches in Saudi and how that governance can be challenged. I know one of the most important questions for students is how you'll be assessed on this topic. So this is very much the traditional essay type that you'll have sat before. It's a 4,000-word essay, but we will give you some free rein as to the topic of your choice. Obviously, it has to be something that you've studied within the unit, but you can come up with a question of your choice, which we will discuss with you, or Chem will discuss with you beforehand and approve. This will also be combined with a 1,000-word annotated bibliography where you will pick a number of sources and outline why you have chosen those sources as well, just so that we can make sure and you can demonstrate your research skills within that assessment as well. And I think I am handing over to Seamus now.
Thanks, Sarah. It is indeed Seamus with the first of the shorter modules, which is on sport and human rights, which is quite an innovative program that you don't usually see on these sports law masters programs.
And thank you, Mark, for that. And also thank you, Sarah. So you're absolutely correct. This is a 15 credit module, which will be run in term 1. And what I propose to do within this particular module is to explore the current debates along the sport and human rights axis. This is a rapidly developing area of law, and certainly over the last 10 years, there's been an increased awareness of the rights-based issues which arise within a sporting context. And the first issue that we're going to explore within the module is how and why do rights and responsibilities apply to sport. And within this examination, we're going to focus on the traditional deference which sporting organizations have largely and historically had. And we're going to examine what are the larger international human rights frameworks now which underpin their operation. We're going to explore the United Nations General Principles, or the UNGPs for short, and we're going to do a deep dive into what they entail, what are the obligations which they set out, and what are the different pillars which underpin them. We're also going to be exploring the protect, the respect, and the remedy framework. We're going to look at issues such as what are the legal redress which athletes have. We're going to look at issues such as the right to a fair trial for athletes. We're going to look at issues kind of around the expression rights of athletes within the broader civil and political, rights which athletes have. And also when athletes, how can they challenge the infringements which happen? As I said, this is a very rapidly developing field, and I'm going to bring in some of the current debates which exist. So just to put that into context, there's a landmark human rights case which is coming before the ECHR tomorrow. That's the Castor Semenya case coming before the ECHR Grand Chamber tomorrow. So we're going to explore all of these current issues and all of the debates which arise within the sport and human rights context. I'm also going to explore within the module issues around the Olympics and what happens when the Olympics Games come into town. So just to put that into context, we've had the Paris 2024 Olympics, but in preparation for those Olympics, the city of Paris were engaging in operations which raise very profound human rights issues. And we're going to explore all of those within the context of the module. As Sarah alluded to, probably the most important aspect that you're concerned about is the assessment. And in this particular module, because it's a 15 credit module, the model of assessment is based around a 2,500 word advisory note. And this is really a practical operation of some of the key issues which you've discussed within the module, where you're providing advisory guidance and what some of the context in relation to the issues, some advice and some reforms as to how we can better rights-proof a particular issue within a sporting context. It will be based on one of the issues which you discussed and which we examined within the course of the module. But again, we want to make the assessment as real life as possible and geared towards developing your awareness and your understanding of the broader rights-based issues which arise within a sporting context. So happy to answer any questions that you may have in relation to that. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Seamus. Okay, and then the next large module that we've got is the sports law and business, which will be at the start of semester 2, and that's back over to Sarah.
Thanks, Mark. So this unit again is mirrored like the 30 credit one I've just spoke about. So it'll be your core 30 credit unit in semester 2. But this time we'll be examining the relationship between sport and business. So across this unit, we really want to drill down on how sports governing bodies and sports generally balance their regulatory roles with their commercial interests. So just an idea of some of the things that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at sport as work, so how sports balance employment rights and legal rights with the need to make money from perhaps the transfer system, for example. We'll be looking at areas of intellectual property law, so how they govern players' image rights or how they protect themselves against ambush marketing when organising mega sports events. We'll also be looking a bit at how athletes and clubs are taxed and the controversies surrounding that. Other things I propose to look at are breakaway leagues, so how we govern breakaway leagues and how our normal or standard sports governing bodies, want to prevent against that. And we'll also be looking more broadly at the regulation of agents and financial regulation within sport, as well as having a look at things like sport marketing, media and broadcasting issues which can also arise. That was obviously a lot of areas that I threw at you there, but to give an example of how that would work in real life, we have a really recent case called Diarra, in which the transfer system and the legality of that was challenged in the European Court, and that was considered that it could be a breach of competition law. So we'll be looking at how that may affect the transfer system as we know it, and also the issues surrounding the European Super League and all the controversy that came with that, and how that is actually regulated to stay within or out with the legal framework. Again, for this mirrors the Sports Law and Regulation Unit for assessment. So again, 4,000 word essay, your traditional type essay, but it will be something within the areas that we've studied, accompanied by that 1,000 word annotated bibliography. Again, like Seamus says, if you've got any questions, happy to answer them now or at the end. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Sarah. And then the first of our options that we'll be offering is based around a lot of Seamus's work, in particular around safeguarding, but also brings in gender equity and again back to Seamus on children's rights. So Seamus, if you could just talk us through this one as well, please.
And thank you, Mark, for that. And you're absolutely right. This is really my own focus and my research specialism. So in this particular optional module, we're really going to do a deep dive into the children's rights framework which apply within a sporting context. And we're going to align that with the broader debates around safeguarding and also gender equity. This is an optional module, but the issue of safeguarding and the issue of children's rights and gender equity is a topic which is gaining increased prominence within the sporting ecosystem. We're going to be looking principally around the safeguarding issues, and certainly within the sporting landscape, the issue of children's safeguarding is one which has long dominated the sporting arena. However, more recently, in the last 10 to 15 years, we've had increased recognition of children's rights within a sporting context, and certainly within an Olympic context, and even within the football world, there's increasing representation of under 18s. Child athletes, professional child athletes. And we're going to be looking at the legal regulation of their contracts. What are the rights that they have, both as athletes, but also as young people under 18 years of age? How are they safeguarded? We're going to look at what happens when they're injured. We're going to look at head injuries. That's an increasing area across the board now. What are the responsibilities of sporting federations if a young athlete has sustained a head injury? We're going to look at the historical sexual abuse, which has in fact long dominated this issue and this area, and that has really come to the fore recently with the American gymnast team and the sentencing of Larry Nassar, who was one of their head coaches. We're going to look at issues around equal pay and also equal treatment. We're going to look at gender equity within the sporting context. And because this is an optional module, we're going to assess you with a 2,000 word policy brief and also a 2 to 3 minute oral presentation also. And again, this is aligned with developing your broader skills in terms of your oral presentation and your advocacy skills, but also bringing together those core issues within a policy brief. And again, that can be linked to any of the issues which you explore within the module. You'll have some autonomy in relation to what you want to select, but there will be that connection between the brief and the issues which we explore and examine within the module. The principal legal framework here is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that will build upon the knowledge which we will give you in the earlier modules in relation to sport and human rights also. So you come away from the LLM with a broad understanding of all of the rights-based frameworks which apply within a sporting context to all different groups of athletes also. Another key area that I am keen to discuss here is the rules in relation to doping as they apply to child athletes. That's particularly pertinent now. We have a new international doping code coming into effect in 2027. So it's a real opportune time to get to grips with some of the children's rights and safeguarding and gender equity issues which arise within a sporting context. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Seamus. As you can probably tell from the way we're talking, we all have varying degrees of input into all of these modules. So it won't just be Seamus teaching that. There's issues there that would draw on Sarah and James's experience, and in the others, myself and Shem will also play a part to make sure that you get the best out of us throughout the modules. The last of the sports law modules is the other option that you could take, which is contemporary issues in mega sports events, which I'm leading. The idea behind this is to look at the entire life cycle of a major event, from the initial bid process through to its legacy, and looking at all the kind of different issues that can take place within it. So it's making sure that your legal framework can deal with the requirements of hosting. Events like the Olympics and the Football World Cup have very specific legal requirements before you host around all manner of things, not just around creating the stadiums, but, for example, also requiring specific commercial rights to be protected, ambush marketing to be criminalised. But increasingly, governing bodies are requiring human rights protocols to be in place as well. So we'll be looking at all those kind of issues as well. It also means that we'll be looking at one or more major events. So just to give an example of the kind of things that we would be looking at that are current with events that are actually taking place today. At Wimbledon down in London, there's a lot of there's ongoing issues about equality of pay between the men's and the women's game. But also this year, there's been increasing issues around heat. And you'll have seen a lot of the players are often in between the games wearing iced towels around their necks to try and cool them down. And that issue of heat and exposure to heat is increasingly important in most of the events that take place in the summers of either the northern or the southern hemisphere. We're seeing similar issues at the Club World Cup at the moment in America, where games are being extended or even stopped because of the weather. We've had a game that took over 4 hours at the Club World Cup because they had to have a break for a thunderstorm. Also, there's been complaints from the players about the temperatures that they're playing in, which may affect what happens at the Football World Cup in North America next year. And then anyone who's interested in cycling will have seen the sheer number of crashes that they've already been in 4 days worth of the Tour de France, with several people being injured out of the race, with yellow cards being used for dangerous or reckless cycling, and calling into question whether or not the Tour de France should be as big as it is. So again, having this massive impact on the regulation of it. Is the law going to get involved to make it safer? But also on the business of the sport. What's the impact of having a reduced number of teams in the Tour de France because it's no longer safe to have the sheer volume of people on the road at the same time? So they're all the kind of things that we'll be drawing together in this option to look at case studies of what happens at major sporting events around the world. So those are our sports law modules. Alongside of these, we've also got some introductions to research training. So in the first semester, you'll be introduced to research skills to make sure that you have the skills necessary to be able to find and analyze the resources that you need. There'll be introductions to research ethics, and generally there'll be discussions about how to go about writing your assignments. So it's kind of the scaffolding that's necessary to take you from the knowledge that you'll get from the module itself to using that to be able to answer the questions that you are setting yourselves in those modules. The assessment for the research skills module is a portfolio of tasks. So effectively, you'll be set something different to do each week. The task, then you'll go away, you'll do it after having seen how it's done in the class, and then all of those will be put together in a portfolio that you will submit at the end of the semester. The research design module in semester 2 is designed explicitly to make sure that you're ready for the dissertation that you do in semester 3. So what we will be showing you how to do is create the structure for a proposal to be able to write your dissertation. So hopefully then that will encourage you to make sure that you will do the dissertation on what you've designed your proposal around, because that will give you the structure for what you're doing, the background to what you're doing, and ensures that you're in a position to be able to do the dissertation in the final semester. This has got a very similar assessment to the one that Seamus was talking about earlier. There's a brief recorded oral presentation, and then around your aims and objectives, and then a 2,000-word research proposal to explain what it is that you're going to do and how and why. So that gives you a good idea as to what all the modules are about. I'll just hand back over to Seamus, who will briefly talk through the dissertations, because he's been the dissertation leader for one of our other master's pathways in the past.
And thank you, Mark, for that. And absolutely. And we have been very careful to craft in that co-relationship between your proposal and the dissertation ultimately. So for the summertime or term 3, you will spend those couple of months working on your the larger research element of dissertation. And there are 2 approaches that you can take here. There's a 10,000-word essay or the dissertation, which is the traditional 10,000-word approach, or you can do 2 5,000-word essays and independent research essays. There is a relationship between the proposals which you would have been working on, which will form the basis and which will form the basis of the dissertation. Or if you want to do the 3 5,000-word essays, you will build those 5,000-word essays into the proposal early on. So when you come to researching, when you come to carrying out that independent study, you will have a very solid footing upon which to do that. The dissertation element also will be underpinned by regular supervisory meetings with your supervisor, and they will take place over the life course of the summer. So you will have regular updates and meetings and intervals with your supervisor, who will help guide you across the summer months as you carry out your research. And one thing we will stress and impart is that when you are thinking about your proposal, also be mindful of where you want to end up working, perhaps, or your future career aspirations, or perhaps your future doctoral studies, and perhaps to use this time as a solid base upon which to develop your future career or your future studies thereafter. But there is that co-relationship between the research design and the dissertation. So when you're working on your proposal, you'll bear in mind that you will spend the 3rd semester and summer months working on your dissertation and working on how you structure that and how you put beef on the bone effectively. So it'll, as I said, there's 2 elements here. You can do the traditional 10,000-word dissertation, which tends to be the most popular common route, or there is the 2 independent 5,000-word essays. So again, the topic will be up to you, but we will help you and we will advise you and also guide you in terms of developing that ultimate proposal, and then over the summer months then carrying out the dissertation, the independent study, with regular supervisory meetings over the summer months. That helps.
Thanks, Seamus. Thank you. So just to finish off, alongside of what we'll be doing as part of the core curriculum that we've been describing today, we will also be running a series of other activities alongside of it. So we'll be getting in masterclasses, or we'll be running masterclasses in each semester, which will enable us to bring in experts from sports law who are actually practicing lawyers in the sports law world, so that they can explain to you what they do, why they do it, how they got into it, and give that additional insight about how the law actually works in practice inside a firm, inside a governing body, that kind of thing. You'll also have access to the weekly lectures run by the Manchester Metropolitan Institute of Sport. These cover a wide range of topics, not just law, but also looking at issues to do with sports science, sociology, history, economics, business. So a huge range of different kind of lectures where you get to mix with people outside of the law school who are also doing sports related programs. And then we'll also be encouraging people to get involved with the various sports law moots competitions, including the sports law arbitration moot and the football law arbitration moot in particular. So we will be making sure that we can support and help you. We have friends throughout the city who have worked on major arbitration panels, including acting both as lawyers before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but as Court of Arbitration for Sport arbitrators as well, who we are hoping will be able to act as mentors for those of you who decide that you want to do one of the moots. So what we're trying to do in all of this, through both the knowledge that you get in the modules, the different styles of assessment, the co-curricular activities, is make sure that you have not only the knowledge of the sports law that you need, but also a clear indication as to how that works in practice, what you can do with it, and where you might be able to take your career next.